Hello and welcome to the second set of Solus development videos. My name is Sjoerd Jong. I'm otherwise also known as Haurensis. I've been working with Unreal for 15 years and in short basically this is my website haurensis.com and I'm working on a game called Solus. So just like last time I'm going to go through a couple of the things I've done in Solus, a couple of smart tricks and tips and those kind of things, and basically show you how I've built it. These videos aren't meant to be exact tutorials, so I'm not going to explain anything in depth or step by step, but I'm basically going to give you the overview of how I set things up, how I approach certain problems, and basically the way I'm thinking about things. And that will give you an overview on how to work with Unreal Engine 4, how to apply it on a big scale, and it might give you some ideas for solutions for technical problems, tricks, working around issues, those kind of things. Before we get into any of the things I want to show, I first want to very quickly show the game, where the game is at right now. We've made quite a lot of progress. We actually got awarded money in May. We got $55,000. So for indie production, that's quite a lot of money. So I managed to hire a couple of people left and right. And the team is now about 8 people big, of which 3 of them are working more or less full time for a couple of months. So we're making quite a good bit of progress. This is going to be something that's going to come back through the whole of these videos. In particular, the blueprint, you're going to see the impact of us moving part of our functionality over to C++. And then you're going to be seeing how we work with C++ in combination with blueprints. But as mentioned, we're making quite a bit of progress. So of course, this was the first level we've always had. That's still very much so still here. But we have many more levels now since last time. We have several kilometers or miles worth of caves. So here's a big cave system, for example. So you have quite large levels. We choose not to continue with the streaming, so we simply have loading screens in between the levels right now to simplify it a bit, because we're kind of running out of time. We're aiming for having about 2 hours of the game fully playable by January, so that's our current aim. And we have a lot of these levels basically, so here's another set of caves. Same thing. Lots and lots of caves. And we got 2 more islands as well. So we have 3 islands finished and we're aiming for 5 islands in total. This is a completely new outdoor level. This level is quite low, so there's a lot of flooding going on from the tide that goes up and down. And it's basically battling the tide, trying not to drown from the rising tide all the time. And otherwise it's a very low level. And here's another level. This is the central hub island. It's quite a neutral level. So this is the central hub island. Not much happens here. It's basically just quite calm and peaceful environment. It's basically a giant rock sticking out from the ocean. And we have all kinds of artwork as well. We have the spaceship underway for the intro. This is work in progress, it's not in yet. We have all kinds of props and meshes we're adding in. This is like the flashlight you will be carrying. It's solar charged. So when you're underground, it will slowly lose its charge, and then you have to go above ground again and let it charge in the sun. So again, it kind of works with this mechanic that we have, that you have to go above ground, underground, above ground, and so on. You kind of have to balance the two against each other. The king from the ball, one of our previous games, made it in as well. Solus is a spiritual successor to the ball, so there's a lot of references back and forth. So this guy made it in now as well, animated, etc. The game currently has over 4,000 assets, so we've been very busy here. We got lots and lots of stuff. We have it's hard to be exact with it, but at least 7,000 to 8,000 different blueprint blocks, functions, variables, all those kind of things. Probably more than 10,000 different blueprint nodes basically. And we got tens of thousands of lines of code in there as well. So we got lots and lots of content by now. And we've been busy doing a lot of blueprints. Most of the core functionality is now complete. It's just a couple of polished things left and right, but pretty much all the features you see here, it's all pure blueprint. Some exceptions left and right, but we have a lot of different things. For example, you can make a campfire. So I have fire to light up one of these. That starts a campfire. Actually starts two. You can feed the campfire, and then it becomes bigger. It actually gives off heat as well. So we have that. We have these story things. We have an alien font. The pocket computer thingy on the left translates that. It's kind of like the Unreal Universal Translator. It also works with images. It also works with papers. We have this communication tower thing we can build. So you can deliver assets to it. And then it adds them to it. So now it added a ball over there, for example. So you can build this entire tower like that. A lot of different pieces here. You can see, for example, I can apply this one as well. And then it added a piece on top, and so on. Oh, you have a backpack, but that's not entirely done yet. You have sleeping gear, so I actually have a mattress now. If you sleep on a mattress, your sleep quality improves. We have just random different items. Killer plant here also. Again, almost all of these are done in pure blueprint. So we literally have thousands and thousands of blueprint blocks now to make all of this work. For example, you can use this pipe and add it to this to complete the lever system. And so on. So again, we're making a lot of progress. I don't want to focus too much on the game though. These videos are about the development and using Unreal Engine 4. So let's get going with that. Right, so visually I want to highlight a couple of different things. What I usually do is I use very simple visual things to kind of improve the look and feel. The thing is, there's a lot of advanced features out there. For example, nowadays you can have clouds that accept lighting and they cast a translucent shadow, that kind of stuff. It's very nice to play around with. But in an actual production environment where you need to have stuff done quickly, and especially where performance is really important, it often doesn't really work out to implement such kind of features on a big scale. Right, so I tend to focus on really simple things, really simple visual elements, and do as much as I can with those. So for example, one example of that is when lightning strikes or an explosion happens, what happens now is that your screen brightens. Like that. It's very simple stuff, but it does tend to add a lot to the look and feel, I feel, and it doesn't cost any performance at all. I have a number of other of those kind of effects. I'll get back to those in a second. Let me very quickly show you how I've done this one. So you can use this, for example, when explosions happen, flash grenades go off, those kind of things. What I did is, first of all, of course, there is a post-process material, post-process blendable material on the post-processing. That one for me is located here. And there, I have two of them actually, depending on where you are. This is the general one, which does a whole lot of stuff, and I kind of have to delete some of it. This is no longer used. But part of that says, for example, this overlay opacity, overlay color. So that's the color. In this case, that was bluish white, and this is how bright it is. He combines these together, and then he adds it on top of the original screen. So what's over here, that came all the way back from there, and this is what the screen actually outputs. So it takes the original output of the screen and it adds a color on top, and then it brings that to the exit. So that's all it does, and I basically just change these two in Blueprint, and that's everything I do. And I change them dependent on how far the player is away from where it happens. So if you're further away from the lightning strike, in this case, it's going to be less visible. So I have a blueprint here, and the actual lightning strike itself is that one. You can see this is all it does for the lightning strike. So every time lightning strikes, it spawns a blueprint, and that blueprint in turn, on begin play, slight delay, will spawn the lightning particles, sound, those kind of things. Now this one is going to check how far the player is away from where the lightning strikes. You can see it does it over here. So he gets the player pawn. He gets the distance from the pawn to self, so distance between where the lightning strikes and where the player is. He clamps it to ensure it doesn't go over a certain range, and he maps it to a range. So if you're right next to it, if you're actually on the position where the lightning strikes, it becomes 2. He outputs 2 over here, and otherwise he outputs 0. And that goes in here, and he sets overlay color and overlay opacity. That's pretty much it. Now the color is a constant given value, it's just this light blue color, but the opacity, that's controlled by this one. So therefore the opacity will be 2 if you're standing right in front of the lightning, or actually 2 times 1.5, so a little bit more, and it will be 0 when you're more than 4096 units away from where the lightning struck. That's it. And also it blends it uses the alpha here, so it blends between 0 and the full intensity, and it uses the timeline over here to do so. And this timeline is a very simple animation. It goes up and down, so basically it fades in and it fades back out, blended together with the calculation that checks how far away you are from the location where this hits, and the result is this very quick flash that then fades out. Again, it's very simple actually, but it does add something to the game. We have something not entirely different, but it's related, but it's a completely different way of doing it. What I also have is this. Let me show you some pictures. Now this is not Solus, it's a different game. I've done this in Solus as well, which I have a second picture of it. But I managed to get volumetric lightning almost going with actually just using a couple of very simple mesh and very simple particles. So you can kind of see the light kind of seems to light up the distance fog, and you kind of get this glow surrounding the lights. And here you can see what it does in Solus. Let me zoom in. Let me slightly make the window a little bit bigger. You can see this is a cave we have without this effect. So this is how it used to look. So you have very harsh kind of lighting going on. I mean, you have a light here, there's a torch laying on the ground. There's a light right above that one, and that light just casts light, and that's pretty much it. Right, so you get a very harsh contrast. It's very bright here, but you can see the pixel right behind it. Like there, that's pretty much just black. So you get very harsh contrast between bright and dark. Same here. This is extreme. See, it goes literally from white to black. It's very harsh, it's very simple, it's not very polished. So I added the same trick to Solus here, and the result is this. See, we're coming from this, I now have that. We kind of get this really big glows around, and it kind of seems to light up the smoke and the fog and all that in the caves. And this is extremely simple, the way I've done this. It's not very heavy either. It does add a couple of translucent layers to the screen, so there's a bit of a cost to that. But other than that, this has no performance impact whatsoever. I can show you how I've built this. Right, I have a test level here. I'll make it night so it's a bit easier to see what's going on. So I have a big open floor here, and let me add an item to it. And my camera speed is a bit high still, so right, so now I have a torch that's lit. So it's just a torch. And you can see what it does here. There is a glow around it. Still not that easy to see here in this level. Let me very quickly add a wall behind it. That kind of darkens the background. And I'll make the wall black or similar. Still kind of hard to see, but it actually adds a glow surrounding it. And the way it does this is it's just actually a very big sprite. You can see it's this one. That's the glow you're looking at. Actually, the cave crystals might show that better, so let me add that one. can see it has a glow around it. That doesn't come from the bloom. There, I can show you how it looks without that effect. So let me very quickly next to this window do that, and let me also remove those rings surrounding it. It's kind of hard to see with those. Without the particle it looks like this. With it looks like that. And again, it's just a particle actually. In this case it's a rectangular particle, but it's just a particle, and in this case it sticks to the z-axis, so it doesn't rotate up, but it's camera facing in all other directions. You can see it here in blueprint. It's just a particle system attached to it. If you have to then look at the particle itself, it's a single sprite, and it just looks like this. It's extremely simple. It has lock axis set to rotate set. It has a color set. It has a size, obviously. It has lifetime 0, so it never disappears. It has spawn rate 0, but it has a burst list item added with 1, so it adds a single sprite at time 0. And it loops once, so basically it never loops. It plays once and that's it. So it spawns a sprite once and then it will forever stay there. It won't do anything else. And this gives a nice glow to it. It's mostly in the material. So if you look at the material, that's where most of the work happens. So this is the setup. I use 2 radial gradients because you can actually see if you look at it, it's a little bit brighter in the middle, right? So there's a bigger, softer glow surrounding it, and then there's this bright spot in the middle. That's one radial gradient, and that's blended with a second radial gradient for the outer glow. So that's one, that's the other one. You can see this one has a power added to it. If you add a power to a radial gradient, and for your information, a radial gradient does nothing more than to, well, basically just make a gradient. You can preview that. It just does this. By adding a power behind it, I can control how big the thing is and how hard it falls off, because this one is quite hard, see, it kind of just instantly disappears. So by doing 32, I basically shrink it, and I also decrease how quickly it falls off. See, this is more subtle, more soft, more gradual. I add these two together, so now I have this. I could have removed the multiply there, it's not really needed. I clamp it just to be safe. I blend it together with the particle opacity, basically the particle alpha, so I can make it fade out in the particle system, which I don't really need that, but it's just have a bit more options. There's not a multiplier with a value, you don't really need it either, not a clamp. I could have probably removed one of these clamps in reality, but it works. I add a depth fade, because the depth fade of course makes sure that you don't see an edge, you don't see the intersection where the particle intersects with the mesh. That would be strange and ugly. So I have a standard depth fade with a standard range of 100 actually. And then I have that blended, so multiplied with this arm. And what this arm does is, it basically does this. It fades out, it fades to black if you look at it from the side, and it fades to white if you look at it from the front. It doesn't matter in which angle you look at it. So when you look straight at the surface, it's white, otherwise it's black. And because that one blends together with the other one, it basically results in, not sure if you can preview this, I don't think you can preview it. But it basically results in, if you look at the flare from the side, it fades out. If you look at it from the front, it's visible. And why that's important, you're going to see in a second with a different example. Or actually I can show it on the crystal right away. So you can see the flare here from the front, but if you look at it from the top, it disappears. It's no longer here. I can try to increase the color a bit of this, so it's perhaps more obvious. So now we have a green one. Let me make it even more brighter. Okay, that's a little bit extreme, but we have a giant green flare. And you can see this from all directions, but when you look at it from the top, it fades out. And fades back in if you look at it from the front. This makes sure that we can never get above the flare and see the flare in such a way that you can see that it's basically a flat plane, because it fades by the time you can do that. If you wouldn't have done that, So if we would have just bypassed, where is it? This step over here, just disconnecting it. Then what would have happened is this, see, when you get above it, you can kind of see it, and this doesn't really work. And then secondly, what we've also done is we added this thing here, pixel depth. It's my own function, but it's actually a very simple setup. It's just a standard pixel depth multiplied with a number, and I clamped it. And what that does is it calculates the distance from the camera to a certain pixel in the scene. So in other words, by having it set up like this, it ensures that it fades out when you get near, see? And because it's now extremely green, it's not exactly the best idea to do this, but it basically fades out when you get near the particle. You can kind of see it now, see, it gets less bright. Again, it's way too green to properly show this, but that's the idea. If we combine all those simple steps together, we now have, let me get the picture back. We basically get this, which is 3 single particles. It's 3 2-polygon sprite particles, that's it. And it's relatively simple materials, but we get a nice, completely different look. Then I took that approach and I took it a step further, because it works on crystals, it works on fire, but then I figured I also have lamps. How do I do it on a lamp, right? Because a lamp is actually placed on a building, the building has different shapes, I mean, it's multiple angles, those kind of things. So what do I do with that? And what I ended up doing was I made a mesh that was made up of 3 planes, and I placed the same material on that mesh, with, which gives the same kind of effect. Here we have this level. It's really dark, it's really contrasted. I don't think it looks very good. You get very harsh contrast between the lights, the lamps on the building, and the blackness of the cave. So it actually looks like this without lights. So it's a big cave, and there's a building in the cave. Same thing here. I could have used particles, but what I did instead is I made a mesh, and I made a mesh like this. It's really just three planes intersecting. They're all planar mapped, so it's just 0 to 1 planar UV coordinates. That's it. So I'm going to place that mesh on in the level. So here we go. It's the same mesh. You can only see 2 of the planes because one of the sides is invisible, given it's the back side of it. I'm going to make it bigger because it tends to work better if it's large. So now I have a mesh like this, and I have the same kind of material for that. So I prepared this material here. It's a little bit different here and there, but it's pretty much the same thing. Same number of steps. I'm going to assign that to my mesh. And what I now have is this. You can see no matter at which angle I look at it, it does slightly change its shape here and there, but it pretty much stays constant, and I have an actual flare. If you get near, it fades. If it intersects with geometry, it's you can't see any hard edges, and so on. And it kind of softens the lighting. And in reality, this is just 3 planes. So again, you have a lot of these fancy particle materials and setups and all kinds of stuff, features. But at the end of the day, it's usually the simple stuff that's really, really useful on a big scale. Because I can easily add this anywhere I want in the level now. It doesn't really take that much performance. I can easily get rid of it as well if it takes too much performance. I can, for example, make sure it doesn't appear on low detail. And it works. I'm gonna rotate it so it aligns with the building. So now I have this, and you can see what happens is this. You get a glow around it from every angle. It's kind of subtle, but it works a bit brighter there actually, but it pretty much works. It works better than a particle. The reason why I didn't use a particle here is because a particle is camera facing. So if you're here, or actually you're standing a little bit like this from below, the particle would go through the wall, because the bottom part would be behind the pillar probably, it would be there, and it would probably cut through the wall and then go up. So you get a frame like that, and by doing so, it would render somewhat in front of this these meshes, and that wouldn't look very good. So instead I made a cross, and then I don't have that problem. You can do the exact same thing with the sun, and that's exactly what I did as well. So if I go back to one of my presentation levels, here you can see my sun, and what happens, you have this glow around it. If you look away from the sun, the glow kind of follows you, and then it begins to fade out. Same thing here. You can see no glow at all, and then the glow begins to come. You can see gets a bit more orange here, and then it surrounds the sun. If I wouldn't have had that, it would have looked like this, and it's quite a big difference. So this is my particle, and it's actually that one. So without it looks like this, and you can see that really doesn't look as good as it should. First of all, the sky is way too dark surrounding the sun, and again you get this very harsh contrast. It just kind of appears, and that's kind of it, right? But with this effect, you get a nice soft glow to it. You can see here also on the corner, without glow, with glow. Now there's a built-in feature that kind of does the same thing. If you were to take a standard directional light, and you look in the properties, and of course you have a section for light shaft bloom. If you enable that, you can get something similar, but the problem is, first of all, you don't have much control over it. You don't have much control over the exact color, brightness, angle, all those kind of stuff. And you also have to live with the fact that it brings the actual light shafts along. So these dark and bright rays coming from an object if the sun is behind it. I personally really don't like those. I think they're very programmer art-like. They're also too typical, so you're going to be seeing that in every single other game out there. Plus, even that aside, there is a major issue with those things, is that when you have a translucent surface, for example an ocean, in the distance, that translucent surface will render on top of the light shaft bloom and the bright overlay. So that drove me to try to make my own system. And what I ended up with now is this. So what it basically is, it's a gigantically large particle. You can't really see it here, but it's a really big particle that's attached to the position of the sun. So the sun is actually made of two different particles. This is the sun flare, and again it's really big, so you can't even zoom out here. The sun flare is just a single, it's kind of the same idea again. See, it has no lifetime, it has a size and all that, it has no spawn rate, but it has a burst lift with one item. It's the same kind of idea. And the material just looks like this. It's basically, it's basically just some kind of dot thing, right? And that just goes through the sky. That's the actual sun. But then I made a second one, which is the sun lens flare. And that one is this one. That one has 3 particles in there. Again, they're all kind of the same idea again. Again, 0 lifetime and so forth. But the third one, and the first 2 actually, they're just normal ones. I can show you it out. That's this. That's the white flare, and that's the soft glow around it. So that's 2 different sprites. And actually, if you go behind an object, they render through the object. This ensures that if I wouldn't have done that, then the black object would have rendered on top. And that wouldn't really look like it glows in front of the object. So what I did actually, let me explain that first. This is kind of a trick. I'm still working on that trick. I'm still working on perfecting it. But if you take a material of a flare, and on the left you have a section that says, a property that says disable depth test. If you disable the depth test, then the material will render through all geometry in the world. So basically you get this. But then if in game you do a trace from the sun to the player, so in the sky blueprint I'm tracing from the actual sun's position to the player, and I check if the trace hits something. If the trace hits something, then I will fade out the opacity of the sun. If it doesn't hit something, so for example now it would hit me, it would hit the camera, so it wouldn't fade out, but now it would hit the cube, not the player, therefore it fades out. So in game, this appears correct. So you can't see the flare, but if you're standing here, you can now see the flare. You can see there's the line and there's the outer glow. So you can still see the glow surrounding it. You step behind the object, now the trace fails and it fades out. So that's step 1, but that still wasn't good enough. See, it's still too harsh. So then I took it a step further and I said, okay, fine. Let me add a third one to it. And the third one's material is kind of special. It's kind of the same idea, because it has this camera vector here. It has this setup, and this is the setup that makes it fade out when you look at it from the side, right? You can see it here also. When you turn it, it kind of just fades out. I use that in combination with, well, another, this just creates some kind of dot thing. And well, I scale it by, depending on the time of the day, scale the brightness of it, or rather the color in this case. But that setup is enough in combination with this simple particle over here to get this kind of soft glow fading in and fading out. Now, of course, it does add a couple of translucent layers on top of the screen. That does have a slight cost, but on the other hand, the material is really simple, so the cost isn't that high. Another trick I employed is trying to make a good ocean. So water in Unreal Engine 4 is quite hard to do. There's a number of rendering limitations to water. First of all, due to the deferred render, it's very difficult to get proper translucent lighting going. You, for one, can't get proper specular like reflections and light reflection going on. You can't get the actual reflection to really work properly either. So the moment you try to make a proper translucent sea or ocean, you're going to get really, really stuck. If you don't make it translucent, it's perfectly doable. But I really need a translucent beach, basically, ocean basically. And I need to be able to have it fade out when it hits the beach. So I had major issues trying to get the ocean to work, but I now have a system that kind of works. So the first problem is that you don't get the actual reflection of the environment on the water surface. That means you also don't get this, the brightness of the sun. You don't get this kind of effect, where you can see the sun there and you can see the brightness on the surface below. I also want to have the actual reflection. I mean, I want the color of the ocean to be kind of complicated, not just one color, but it should kind of reflect the environment, the different colors you can find in the sky. So if the left of the sky is orange, like here, and this side is bluish or purple, I kind of want to see that color difference in the ocean as well. So I figured the best way forward is if I capture a cube map of the sky. So if I in real time capture a picture, a cube map of everything it sees, and it projects that on a plane. So that's what I have here. It's just a very big plane. And it has a picture of the sky. There's a number of problems there. So we can get, first of all, I can just add that capture actor thing here for a moment. So I used a scene capture cube. You can add it to the level. There we go. I added this somewhere. It's floating around here somewhere. And then if you were to look in the properties, it looks like this. The problem is, if you make this capture to a cube map, it's gonna capture every frame, and it doesn't just take a picture of the screen, it's gonna re-render the entire level. So in the beginning I had this capturing every frame because I couldn't figure out a better way of doing it. And therefore I basically rendered the entire level twice. My performance was horrible. So then I started looking for a way of improving this. And first of all, I found out that if capture every frame is off, it will still update this thing if it gets moved. That's actually what it says here in the thing as well. The component will render once and onload, and then only when moved. So what I did is I wrote a little blueprint script that moves it. So every second it does this, next second that. So it just does this, a very slight move, but it just does set position. Therefore I can now control the frame rate of this. I can manually say exactly now you should recapture, and now, and now, and now. That improved it already. But then I ran into the problem that by doing it with a very slow frame rate, I could basically see the picture on the ocean update, very harshly. It's like here, suddenly it's like there, suddenly it's like there. When the planet moves, it's just, you can really see frame per frame jumping from one picture to the next. So I figured I need a better way of doing it. And then what I came up with was this system. Can play here for a moment. So it works. It's not 100% realistic or accurate here and there. Sometimes the position is slightly off. It's kind of subtle to see, but you can see this planet is moving and the reflection actually follows it. Very low resolution. You don't really see the low resolution anyway. When you blend it together with the ocean, it's fine if it's very low res. It's more about the colors and the tints than the actual reflection. But you can see it's moving. Same for the planet there. The reflection accurately follows the object. I can increase the speed of the sky a little bit so it's a bit more obvious what's going on. And here you can see what the trick is. If it goes too fast, you can see what it does. So I got it to blend between frames, not just jumping from frame to frame, but blending between the two. And by doing that, I managed to get a frame rate of 0.5 out of it. So it captures once every 2 seconds, and it smoothly blends between the previous capture and the current capture. The way I've done that is through this. So this is my test material. It captures 2 cube maps. I have 2 cameras. Each of the cameras has its own cube map. And it alternates, this one alternates, between this one to that. So this one has a 0 to 1. So it goes continuously from 0 to 1, from 1 to 0, 0 to 1. So it goes back and forth. Therefore it switches continuously from this blending to that blending to this. And it does that at the same speed that it's capturing the ocean. My script for that is very simple. It's basically just this, and that's all it does. So on begin play, we're setting a timer. Every 2 seconds, it executes this. So every 2 seconds it's going to do that. It's only going to do it if the player is above ground. So I'm using this underground. For me, it's always under a certain location in the world. So if you're above ground, it will execute, and then you just flip-flop. First one, then that one, then first A, then B, then A, then B, and so forth. We set the location, and this one blends it. So this one passes on a simple 0 to 1 animation to this one. And it reverses and plays. So it basically just goes back and forth, and that's really it. And by doing so, I can place the script anywhere, and the ocean will instantly update, and it looks smooth while it's in fact very, very low frame rate. So for the time being that works. I do think there's more improvements possible there, but it's working for now. So when I apply that system to the entire material, to the entire ocean, sorry, I get the following. And you can see I have the sun actually reflecting off in the surface of the ocean. Also when it gets night, the light dims. I mean, it actually follows the color correctly. Let me walk to the ocean a bit. Because also the surface is working out quite well, and actually the reflection is actually taking on a normal map while the material is completely unlit. It's kind of hard to get up close to it now, as there's still some issues with it. I don't think my ocean right now is perfect, so I kind of just jumped through for a moment. But you can see it's, let me just fly actually. Again, I don't think it's perfect, but it's better than it was. And I do have it kind of normal mapped, animated. I have highlights in the surface. Let me fly away. I basically have this. That's the same trick with reflection, plus my ocean material is very, very complex. I'm not going to explain how I did it. I have to clean it up as well before I do that. But it's ridiculously complicated. And I've gone through a lot of tries to get to anything near okay in doing this. Show you my actual surface right now is this one. Again, it needs some cleaning, and it still looks like this. Some of it is no longer used, but still. And before that, I've already gone through lots and lots of tests. Like this is a previous test, and I ended up doing this just to get anything going, and then I also had this one. So I've gone through lots and lots of tries in doing this and get the most out of it. But it works, and you can see it's translucent. You get near, it kind of fades out, and it has some of these darker spots moving through for a bit of variation, and so on and so forth. And all the waves near the beach, that's just particles. See, it's literally just a particle, a series of particles that fade in. They move forward and then they kind of flow back again, or come to a stop and then they slowly go back. Even these have the cube map blended on top. I mean, once I have the cube map, I might as well just use it everywhere. It's no longer a cost associated with it. The cost to the cube map is capturing it, not using it. So I pretty much just throw it on top of everything. And the result kind of works as far as I can make it work right now. We're also working on an ice team. This is still very much so a work in progress. So it's not visually very finished yet. There's a lot of issues and all that, but the idea is kind of there. So what I have is basically this. I mean, it's the ice world. It's the layer beneath the normal caves. And you basically have caverns like this. This has been built in the very same way that I've built the original caves. So all of these meshes are done in the same way. So you have a fairly big library here of random pieces. You can see these are all done like pretty much this. Had a unique normal map and such rendered for it. The mesh kind of fits the shape of it as per my original method. And then they're kind of pushed together. It's not ideal yet. I do get quite hard seams, which I'm still trying to find a way of solving this. But other than that, it kind of works. The one thing I've done special here though is that all of these meshes are the normal rocks. So what I've actually done is I made the material depth aware. So you can see if you move the rock up, it looks like a normal standard rock. But the moment you move it down, it's gonna start looking like ice. Like there. So it automatically turns itself into an ice version of the same mesh. You can see even the reflection, I mean the whole thing updates. Again, the way of thinking here is that sure you can make a second material and then sure you can take the properties, you know, and you can override the material here with a different material that looks like ice. But you want to try to get everything as smooth and as automated as possible. Because it's all about production, it's all about speed. So you're trying to really make everything just as simple and as straightforward as possible. You just intersect meshes, you just make the meshes automatically update the materials, and so forth. The way it does this isn't very difficult at all, actually. I made myself a new function because I'm using this through in multiple materials. And if you're using a setup in multiple materials, it's always a good idea to turn it into a function. Because then if ever you have to update it, you would only have to update the function. So I added this function in between here, near the very end. So roughness, specular, metallic, the whole thing is all dependent on this one. The normal map even as well. And this basically just adds a layer on top. If you look here what I've done over here, it basically takes an ice texture somewhere, or at least some kind of overlay, this one. It's some kind of noisy overlay thing. Detail map. It uses that, and it uses that to recolor the original one, so it adds some color on top, bluish color, and it makes it more shiny. That's basically all it does, and the result is this. It's also about reusing assets, so we don't have to make new assets, but we can just reuse everything we have, and it will all update along automatically.